How's it going, everybody? And welcome to episode 270 of Master My Garden podcast. Now, this week's episode being the first Friday of April, it's the monthly seed sowing guide and kind of other jobs that we can be doing. And to put a bit of context on it, as we all know, here in Ireland, we've had a fantastic few weeks weather-wise. So pretty much no rain now for 4 weeks. A little bit of a damp day. I think it was about a week ago there. There was some rain, but not a lot. Definitely, it has been a lovely, lovely dry time with a little bit of wind, and everywhere has got dried up quite quickly. But what was missing, I suppose, up until this week was a little bit of heat along with that. So we did have the dry weather, but a little bit of heat has come into it now, and it definitely feels like spring. And, I've said this before that timings and dates of sowing are very relevant to what's happening outside because you have to have somewhere for these seedlings to go. And now to me, it feels like spring. Everything is waking up. The birds are singing, the hedges are bursting out. Grass has really burst into growth. In fact, in the last week, the growth has been explosive. That's how much the temperatures have come up. There is still a bit of coolness at times in the wind, but we really are now in a really lovely period of spring weather. And why these are relevant on a year to year, some you might think if we do the seed sowing guide for April this year, then that does for every April. But no, these episodes are proven really popular because we kind of tailor it a little bit. The guide or the list to what you can sow remains kind of the same year to year, but maybe the messaging around it is different year to year. So we really get sowing when the weather is the way it is at the moment, when it feels spring-like, when we know that it's not summer weather, but it's starting to feel like that warmth is there, and then we know that the potential to come is there. And yeah, that along, given that it's early April, that comes with the caution that we just need to have around last frost dates and frost and potential rain over the coming weeks, cold rain, especially as we start to get young seedlings out into the ground or start to sow seeds into the ground. So that's why it's different. If you go back to this time last year, we had pretty much the same sowing list, but what we had at that time was cold, wet, no sunlight, and certainly nothing to be getting excited about. But for any of you living in Ireland anyway, for sure, you're definitely excited. You're definitely up and going now. You're definitely sowing your seeds. You're seeing growth, and everything is moving in the direction that we'd like it to at this stage of the year. Wherever you are listening, I hope that you're having similar good news stories in relation to your weather, and you're getting a good start to spring. But the list of what we can sow, as I say, we're going to go through that now, and then we're going to chat about just some of the things that we need to watch out for over the coming weeks. A lot of the seedlings that we have now, they're still going to be tender. They're still going to need a little bit of minding, and they're going to be used to coming from a certain environment. A good example of that was I happened to be in the garden centre yesterday, and they just got a trolley in of tomato plants. They're in little 10 centimeter pots. They were, maybe 10 centimeters tall, really small plants. They looked like they'd just come out of a lovely warm greenhouse, and then they were on a trolley with the cold wind blowing across them, and they did not look happy. And I suppose that's the beauty of what we can do. We can mind them, we can look after them, and then we can put them into the right location when everything feels right. The fact that we've had good weather pretty much means that anything that we want to sow now, we can really get going. And certain things that you might feel like you're late on will sow now will really catch up, and I'll chat about those as well. So we're going to talk about the seeds that we can sow, the precautions we can take for young seedlings to mind them. And it's not just about cold or wet, it's potentially about dry. So the top couple of inches of particularly no dig beds at the moment are quite dry because we've had this wind for a while without much rain. And so the top little bit of the ground can be dry. And of course, that's where your seeds are going. That's where your young plug plants are going. They're going into that top inch or so. So that can be dry. So we're going to need to think of that as well. Watering is important at this stage. So loads to get through. But to get into the list, I suppose it is the same list that we do pretty much every year with more or less no exceptions. And it's a comprehensive list for April. It's pretty much, there's everything is on the table for this month in terms of the edible garden. In terms of flowers, we mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, there's still brilliant time to be sowing all your annuals. A lot of the heat now is up, so annuals, cosmos, any of those. Anyone looking to sow dahlias, go ahead. Perfect timing. With the warm weather, they're just going to fly out of it, get them potted up in a few weeks, and then you'll have plants to go out into borders sort of mid-May and or mid-May to the mid-June, I guess, that kind of time frame. And that's perfect. They'll grow on into strong plants over the summer and definitely give you flower this year. So all flowers are on the table. Dahlia tubers, still an opportunity to get those in. So anyone that hasn't done that, and keep your eyes open, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, lots of sort of 30% off, 50% off in some cases, and they'll give you a great opportunity to get a lot of plants in. And the ground is temperatures are rising, so they're just going to take off straight away. Keep an eye out for slugs. There's going to be less of them at this stage because it has been quite dry, so that's a good thing. But watch out for slugs on particularly things like dahlia tubers or young plants going out. Again, a lot of the bedding plants are starting to go on sale. Just be careful there. Typically, bedding plants, if you went back over the years, it was sort of mid-May was when we got going with those. At the moment, as I say, you see them in shops. So just watch out for those. Don't be so quick to put out them. There's lots of good spring options still available that are going to be hardy for any bit of weather we might get over the coming weeks, and then switch to your summer stuff in a couple of weeks' time. But yeah, the list that we can get sowing on. So to talk about the sort of successional stuff, so the stuff that we're going to sow on a regular basis, we're looking at spring onions. They can be sowed now. They can be sowed into module trays still, or even directly into a polytunnel, or in some cases outside. The ground temperatures, as I say, are coming up. So we have the opportunity to sow more stuff this month, more seeds this month, but also the opportunity to sow them in different ways. So previously, almost everything we were sowing, we were putting into module trays where we had the opportunity to give it a little bit of mollycoddling or minding, as they say. But now we have the ability to switch and sow directly as well, which is great. So spring onion is the first one on the list. That'll be on the list every month now. So we sow every month. That means you're going to sow it successionally, and you're going to keep having new plants, new harvests coming all the time. Spinach is another one. Again, same thing. You're going to have to keep sowing it regularly. It will run to seed, especially annual. Well, annual spinach is definitely going to run to seed. The pace at which it runs to seed will speed up as the temperatures rise throughout the year. So in the summer months when we get really warm temperatures, that spinach is going to run to seed a lot faster than it will in the springtime or even in the autumn time. So just you'll have to sort of tweak your sowing intervals as that happens. But for now, once a month, do a sowing once a month, and you'll be able to harvest then for a full month, and then your next batch will be coming on. So that's another one. Radish is another one that's going to mature quite quickly at the moment, and yeah, that's going to become sort of a regular one that we sow on a monthly basis. Turnips, as in the white turnips, they're again Milan purple tops and so on. They can be sowed now. Again, they will kind of come into your successional sowing because there's a certain size that they're really tasty. If they start to go above that size, they get a bit woody and not so nice. So I would sow little and often on that. So small amount, do it every month, and then you're going to kind of have that fresh, perfect sized one, which, it's that the size for those is like the size of, say, a mandarin orange, for example. That's kind of the size you're looking for the perfect taste. Above that, they can get a little bit strong. They can also get a little bit woody or stringy, and they're not so nice. Lettuce, we're going to sow on a monthly basis. But again, if you're utilizing sort of clever harvesting methods, you may not need to do that every month, but you can sow every month, and it's a good idea to do that. Lettuce that you can use, to give you over a longer period, things like cut and come, where you're not going to harvest the head of lettuce, but rather harvest a selection of leaves whenever you want them. And that'll just give you a harvest over a much longer period, and it'll mean that you don't have to do as many or as regular sowings. Next one on the list is sort of spring summer salads, and you're talking about a mix of things here. It can be anything from quinoa leaves to rocket to mustard, and a mixture of leaves, and they can be all kind of mixed together, and then you get kind of a mixed salad. So it's a really nice mix. And again, it would act in a kind of a cut and come way. It's not strictly speaking cut and come, but it would act in that way. So you're able to do that. Onion is another one, really good one. So kind of the last opportunity to sow onions from seed. I sowed onion from seed there a few weeks ago. So two varieties bought in the same shop on the same day, two separate varieties. They're planted into a big tray. Half of the tray has 100% germination. On the other half of the tray, not a single onion has germinated. Problem is, I can't remember what shop I bought them in, so I actually can't go back with them, but they were non-viable seed. A little bit frustrating. I actually only ended up buying them, where I bought them because um, I was full sure I had a couple of packets left from last year, and it turned out I didn't. But these seeds were off the shelf, and again, as I say, I can't remember exactly where I got them, but they are 100%, they were not viable. So anybody who's bought them, they're going to have any success with them for sure because the conditions are identical. They're in the same tray. So it's a big 308 tray. Half of them was done with one variety, half with the other, and just no germination on one side. It's kind of frustrating. So yeah, gonna have to probably lean back on onion sets a little bit there. But anyway, that's the way it goes. You can't have things like that. Onions can be sowed, and this kind of, as I said, the last chance to do that. Leeks, the other one, you're looking at early maturing varieties here, and we will do another sowing of leeks for later on in the time. But now, early sowing of earlier varieties, and you're going to multi-sow them into a plug tray or a a module tray. Beetroot, again, for me, I won't do a lot of sowings of that, but you can sow them now. A lot of people will sow beetroot into module trays. I don't. I just direct sow when the time is right, and for me, the time is right now. So beetroot going in, uh, yeah, over the weekend, fingers crossed. And that's kind of the first batch of seeds. Then we're looking at some of the brassicas. Again, I sow these intermittently. I don't sow them all the time, but looking at cabbage, calabres, cauliflower, Swedes, pak choi, chard, all those. Now, no, they're not all the brassica family, but that's the sowings that I do of those. I kind of do only a few times, not every month, but you can sow all of those this month perfectly fine. I'll do some of the peas and beans. So broad beans I sowed last month, but again, you can sow them this month, and that's kind of, this month and early into next month is kind of the last shot you get at that. French beans coming onto the list for the first time, a little bit cold up until now, but definitely now they can be sowed. I do the dwarf one, and I also do a climbing one. It's actually not that terrible much difference in taste. Probably bigger yield off the climbers, slightly better taste maybe off the dwarf ones, and you get a lot from a really, really compact small plant. So either or, but I'll probably be sowing both in the coming weeks. Peas, I already have some sowed, and I'll do more again this month. They're used both ways, so use the leaves off them or the shoots off them, and also let some of them mature for peas, which will come in quite early. I have mine planted into the polytunnel, and yeah, they're going to go really good now from now on. We're into some of the herbs then, and coming onto the herb list this month is basil for the first time. So again, it likes warm weather, so basil is coming onto the list. It really needs heat at the start, needs heat after you get it going, needs minding for a while. Just be careful of colder evenings and so on. Coriander, another one that kind of gets sown successionally because it does both a lot. Dill, parsley, chervil, all of those herbs can be sowed now. If you're growing something like rosemary, sage, thyme, you can do all those from seed. I would be inclined though, because nobody needs a lot of those plants, for most of us in our home gardens. If you go out and get a couple of plants as opposed to sowing seed of those, it's probably, an easier way, because you buy a packet of seed with a couple of hundred seed in it. You don't need a couple of hundred rosemary. Once you have a couple of plants of that, that's going to be there all the time anyway. So unless you're planning to gift them or give them away or grow a rosemary hedge, then I don't really think you need to be sowing a load of those. But you can this month. Celery and celeriac again can be sown. Just remember they need temperature and they also need light. So you don't cover your seed of those. And coming onto the list for the first time this month is some of the warm temperature ones. Something like pumpkins can be sowed this month, more or less for the first time. Cucumbers the same, courgettes the same, squash the same, melon another one. Now, melons like a longer period of time, so if you did have a warm tunnel, which I don't, you could have got them going earlier under on a heat mat or something like that to try just get as much length in the season as you possibly can. Tomatoes can still be sown. I know a lot of people will tell you that that's late, and looking everywhere, there's people planting them already. But it's amazing how quick they will grow at this stage of the year. Once that heat comes, they will just grow. So something that was sowed a month ago won't end up that far ahead of something that's sowed today. But do get going with them now because they need a long enough season as well. And you just end up that your harvest is just pushed that little bit further down the line. If you haven't sowed them and you want to get started and you need some plants, you can get a couple of plants to get you going, to get your kind of early harvest and then add in your own sown ones after that. Other warm ones now are ones that need temperature, cucumber, sweet corn, they can all be sowed now. So, as you can see from the list, it's vast at this stage, and there's probably others that I've missed, but that's everything becomes an option in April, especially when the weather's good like it is now. We're not looking to necessarily hold off because once we're getting that daylight and sunlight, we are going to be able to sow, we are going to be able to get good germination, get good growth early, and then hopefully in a couple of weeks' time when all these seedlings and young plants are ready, that we still have this type of weather and we'll be very, very happy. Other jobs in the edible garden, onion sets, you can still plant those, loads of time for them. Conditions are good, ground conditions are good, so yeah, get those in. Potatoes the same, so whether it's earlies, second earlies, main crops, get them into the ground. Don't worry if you haven't got them in yet, still loads of time. Again, I would have mentioned before that for me, we have this thing here where we want to plant our potatoes on St. Patrick's Day here in Ireland. It's a traditional thing. But again, like the packets of seed, it's not necessarily to do with the date. It's more to do with the temperatures and are the conditions right. So the conditions are right now. It could be St. Patrick's Day in other years. It could be the end of April in other years. But whenever it is, get them into the ground when the conditions are right. If you have the soil temperature right, potatoes just hit the ground and they go. You don't need to worry about chitting or anything like that. Once the temperatures are high, once they're high, they just go and grow strong. And something that got planted in a cold March and something that gets planted in a perfect conditions now, they will be, by the end of April, there'll be no difference between those, none whatsoever. So, and you could even have the potential of some of them getting stunted or getting held back because they've gone out in bad conditions. So all of those can be done now. The other thing that can be done this month, carrots and parsnips can get sown. Parsnips, I only do one sowing of those, but it is a month now where we can get that done, which is great. And the temperatures are such that we can sow those. One thing with carrots, and it's very relevant given that we haven't had rain, carrots need moisture in that sowing zone. So if you mark out your little trench for sowing them, there's loads of people I see online doing, toilet roll and putting the seeds on it, making the toilet roll damp and then putting that down into the little trench. You can do that. Simple way of doing it though is just mark out your little drill, put some water in it with a watering can or whatever, just water that end zone. Just leave it to settle for a minute or two. Shake out your seeds, not too thickly. Shake out your seeds, cover it and water it. And then over the coming weeks, especially if it stays dry with that little bit of a wind, though that top inch of the ground is going to be very dry. And what carrot seeds do not like at the start, and this is where most people fail with carrots, is that top inch drying out. Every couple of days, give that a little sprinkle of water. You don't need to drown it, you just need to give it a little sprinkle of water every couple of days. When you see the carrots all peeping through, continue to water for maybe 3, 4 weeks. Just every couple of days, give them a little sprinkle of water. And you will get strong because they're going to start sending down good roots. And once those roots get established, obviously, they're going to draw moisture from deeper down in the ground. But in that first kind of 3 to 4 weeks critical stage, if you let them dry out at that stage, then you're not going to see carrots and you're going to wonder what happened. And that is 9 times out of 10 the the challenge that people have. So get after that, get watering those. Kind of along the same lines, but going away from seed sowing and planting now. A lot of bare root planting gone in over the last few weeks. Once that weather dried up, once the ground conditions got dry, then a lot of bare root planting got done towards the end of the season, and the season has kind of come to a relatively fast end here. But there's definitely, you need to be watering anything that went in bare root over this season because they have very little roots. That top of the ground, as I've said already, is going to be dry, and there isn't roots there to sustain trees, particularly hedging, anything like that. So you have all this potential growth up on top and then really small root zones. So just make sure that over the next few weeks that you're keeping those watered right through. If we, you'll know yourself, but things are very dry at the moment. So they need water and they need water on a weekly basis to ensure that you get survival. Because the first year of bare root is absolutely critical. If you can get them over that stage, then great bare root plants will grow as good, if not better, than potted plants. So look after them now, but it does take a little bit of nurturing at the start. Other jobs that we can be at, obviously lawns are growing really fast, so you can get scarifying and things like that, get them thickened up, give them regular mowing. Don't go too low at this stage, go mid height, let them thicken up and so on. Get as much moss as you can. If you don't like moss, some people love it, some people are happy to leave it there. If you don't like it, now's the time, scarify it, get it out of there. What other jobs can we be at? The list is endless at this stage, so it's planting. You're probably done with your mulching and all that sort of stuff. Well, I'm not, but most people are probably done with their mulching, have a bit more to do. And yeah, creation of a few beds, small bit of splitting still to do of perennials and things like that. But there's so much, everything is go, go, go now. And yeah, it's lovely to have this weather. It's lovely to have this sunshine. And when you have this sunshine, it kind of nobody minds working a lot or doing a lot in the garden at this stage because it's all enjoyable and the weather conditions are suitable. So yeah, it's a long list. There's lots to do. Watch out for those key points of keeping a bit of moisture in your sowing zone over the coming weeks. Young seedlings coming out of warm greenhouses or warm conservatories or windowsills or wherever they are. Just put yourself into their shoes a little bit. If it's a really cold, breezy day, just watch that. Just give them a little bit of protection. That could be a frost fleece, that could be EnviroMesh, or bio netting, whatever the case may be. Just something to give them a small bit of protection. The one thing that they don't like, and you can get, April showers, you can get kind of not necessarily a day of rain, but you can get these really heavy downpours, kind of driving rain. Just watch for that they really, young seedlings, young plants don't like that at all. So just yeah, watch that and protect them from that. And other than that, it's yeah, it's a great month to be in the garden. Loads to be doing, loads to be sowing. The list is extensive. Continue to sow, even if you have your vegetable beds kind of filled up with plants or seeds at this stage, continue to sow a little bit because there will gaps come later on and then you'll have plants to go into it or you'll have, new crops on the way. Don't forget to take advantage of intercropping where if you put in, for example, your brassicas, a cauliflower, for example, will need a big spacing of plants. But in between, while those plants are getting ready to mature, you have a lot of space that you can utilize. So small little catch crops like radish or spinach or something can go in there while the cauliflower is just starting to grow. And then you can have your harvest taken out of there before the cauliflower takes over and needs that space to mature. So they're just some other useful tips for this time of the year. But other than that, hope you have a great month in the garden. It's yeah, it's perfect conditions at the moment. Fingers crossed that continues. And next month again, we'll have our seed sowing guide for May. Coming up over the next couple of weeks, loads of episodes, loads of good episodes actually. Open gardens are coming back over the next couple of weeks, so a few of those lined up. And yeah, there's lots happening and lots of good episodes to come up from. Great response to last week's episode on with Susan on pruning of fruit trees. Actually, that was, people seem to really enjoy that and get great benefit from it. So yeah, hopefully that helped you in your garden. So that's been this week's episode. Thanks for listening, and until the next time, happy gardening.